Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoterica and a brand new series we're calling MiSTer. And if you know why we're calling it that, if you got the clue from the intro, leave a comment down below and you'll get fake internet points. But this is definitely one of the most requested series that I've gotten in my comments on the community tab. People really wanted to know about the MiSTer field programmable gate array board, so I figured why not talk about it. Before we get too far involved, if you could do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, ring that notification bell. It definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined, we've got a Patreon link down there as well if you want to support the channel. But what this video is we're going to do a hardware overview, and I'm going to tell you what I think is the best hardware to get started with MiSTer, and then we're going to, from scratch, format an SD card and update the hardware so that you are ready to play games, because it isn't the most user-friendly thing in the world. This is not like a Super Nintendo Mini. You don't just plug it in and start playing. There's a lot going on. But taking a look at the top I/O board, I highly recommend this. We have a secondary SD card slot. We got the reset on-screen display and user buttons, as well as some visual indicators. And then we have that fan that's cooling the FPGA chip, a USB hub, and then analog VGA out, which is great if you want to run this on a CRT or a PVM. I highly recommend using that VGA signal. But turning the entire board stack around, you have the switch on the left-hand side, which honestly you never really have to worry about it. Leave it where it's positioned. And I didn't show a setup of how to put these boards together. If you can build Lego sets, you can assemble these boards. If for some reason you're really struggling, message me, but trust me, you'll get it together. And on the side here, you're going to see that we have that audio out jack and that VGA, which I really do love because I have a lot of PVMs, and we've got some power ports in. If you want to play this on a 1080p panel, 4K, anything like that, you're going to have VGA. And you have these two barrel plugs in for power. And I will show you the power adapter I use and like. That way you're able to power both devices off one wall plug, as it gets a little complicated when you have to plug more than one thing in. Taking a look at the side here, that bottom board is just a USB hub. It gives you 7 different USB ports that directly connect to the board in the middle, the field programmable gate array. And that's going to be super useful. And you'll see again on the side, it's just a pin-to-pin connector. It is so easy to put this together. And then you just have this little bridge on the side here, which connects the USB into the middle board. And then you have your Ethernet as well. You can transfer games via Ethernet, and it will auto-detect an IP signal and work perfectly if you plug that in. Or you can send them over via Wi-Fi with an additional module. I like just using the Ethernet, and that's what I recommend. But if you want a Wi-Fi module, I'll leave a link down below. And then you just have the RAM expansion. It's the 128 megabyte version. I recommend that because you'll be able to play Neo Geo ROMs. It can be hard to find the micro SD card slot, but it is on the middle board on the side, and it is spring loaded, so you can just pop that in really easily. But do remember, if you want to set this up from scratch, you don't just need the micro SD card, but you're going to need some adapter. I use the SanDisk adapter, and this little card over there is just for display. I have a 256 gigabyte card in my MiSTer, and I recommend that is the minimum size. 512 gigabytes would be good if you want to do CD-ROM images for Mega CD games, things like the PC Engine CD, and etc. But if you're not going to be using those, 256 gigabytes will definitely get you by. But either way, you need this adapter. And if the mini SD card doesn't read the first time, just reseat it, because it can be tricky. But I do love the I/O board because you have these buttons right on top. You can reset the MiSTer right back to stock to get to the first menu. You can push the on-screen display button to get the core menus, and then you just have a user button. But taking a look at everything we need to make this run, you need a USB keyboard because you do need to at least set it up first with that keyboard. I use a Switch Pro controller for some games, and then you just have a USB-C cable right there. But then we have our power adapter and the barrel plug adapter as well, which I highly recommend because that's going to be really easy to power both of the units with the same wall plug, which is just going to be convenient. We don't want this to turn into something like a Sega Genesis with a CD attachment at 32X where we have 3 plugs. But you'll see here, this breakout power cable, and I will leave a link to that down below as well, has an inline on-off switch because by default, this MiSTer will just power itself. But you plug one barrel into the actual MiSTer board itself, that field programmable gate array, DE10 Nano board, and one into the USB hub, and you are ready to power this. Just pop the other end of the barrel into the adapter, plug it into the wall, and you're good to go. And I do love having that power switch, especially if you're going to leave this plugged in permanently. I like to use the Switch Pro controller, but any USB controller will work on this. You can also use Bluetooth controllers as well, but since I do a lot of arcade gaming and I don't like lag, the Switch Pro controller works great for me because it has all the buttons I need. But you can use a PlayStation 4 controller, you can use an Xbox One controller, an 8-bit DOE. your options are basically limitless. And just to use it, it's super simple to set up. All you do is plug one end of the USB cable into that USB hub and the other end into your controller. And I will later in the video show you how to button map the controller so that it works for you. But when you get your MiSTer, there's going to be no operating system on it. It just comes as that middle DE10 Nano board, and then depending on what you add on, it'll get larger. But if you go to the MiSTer GitHub, and I will leave the link down there below as well, it's going to have some recommendations on the hardware, like that 128 megabyte RAM expansion. That's going to be pretty much essential to be able to run all the cores and all the games. And there's so many different details on the right hand side of this page. You'll be able to see everything that exists for the MiSTer. I just use the USB hub board, the DE10 Nano middle board, and the IO board, and that's plenty for me. But what we're going to do to set this up is we're going to use MiSTer Fusion. And this is basically going to be a one-size-fits-all solution. It's going to install the operating system onto the SD card, and then it's going to install all the cores with an update script. And we're going to go through the entire process, because if you've never flashed an SD card with an image, it might be a little bit difficult because it's not something that you're going to do all the time. But you'll see here with the universal MiSTer installation image, it's going to tell you what you're required. That micro SD card, you're going to need some sort of computer. Pretty much any computer is going to work for this process. And you're going to need that SD card flash utility. In step 2, they list 3 different versions: Apple Pi Baker, Valencia Etcher, and Win32 Disk Imager. I've always used Win32 Disk Imager. That's what I recommend. I flashed SD cards for my FM Towns Marty optical disc emulator, for my Dreamcast optical disc emulator. It always works. But if you click the Releases tab, you're just going to download the most recent zip file, and that's what you're going to need. And like I said, if you're on Windows, just use Win32 Disk Imager. It works perfectly. I've never had an issue with it whatsoever. So now all we need to do is unpack that zip file to get the image file inside of it, the .img. So just use WinZip and unpack that, because that's what we're going to be flashing to the card. You can unpack it wherever you want. That's your choice. I just do it into the downloads folder, but do unzip it. Some flash utilities can flash a zip file, but I just like using the image file because that's what works the best for me personally. So now you'll see I have a USB drive set on J. You can screw up your other hard drives with Win32 Disk Imager, so be 1000% sure you are flashing the image to the right drive. You can't do anything to your installation drive for Windows, but I could accidentally flash this image onto my RAID archive drive and lose a lot of content. So you have to be very careful when you're going to write this. Double check, triple check, make sure you're flashing the image to the right drive letter. If you're not sure, stop and check again. But then all you need to do is click write. It's going to ask you one last time that it's going to confirm the overwrite, so be sure. And you'll see here in real time, I think it took about 9 to 12 seconds. It's extremely quick. If it freezes, just close it and start again, but I've never seen this program fail. Now that we have that successfully written micro SD card, we're just going to pop it into the MiSTer, the middle board, the DE10 Nano micro SD slot. And then we just connect the unit to a television and we power it on. It is going to do the entire installation itself. Sorry for the bad angle, this is where my tripod fit in the living room, but you'll see that it says MiSTer Fusion is installing MiSTer. It takes about 2 minutes. I did speed this up, and then the main menu is going to pop up. But you're going to see there's no files there. So now that we're into MiSTer proper, we need to hook up that USB keyboard, and you're either going to hit F12 or escape. The tutorials say both. Escape always works for me, F12 does nothing. But MiSTer Fusion is going to put the update script onto the DE10 Nano board. So all you need to do is go into scripts, and that's where you're going to update it. It's going to give you a warning that's a dangerous operation. It really isn't. You can either say no, yes, or yes and don't ask again. I personally would say yes and don't ask again because I'm familiar with working with this type of hardware and I know what I'm doing. But if you feel kind of on the fence of being warned before you do something, just say yes, and it'll ask you each time you do something in MiSTer that could technically break the installation before it happens. But all you do is press enter on update. And this will take about 18 to 22 minutes. I've definitely sped it up much faster, but as long as you see something scrolling, that means it's downloading all the cores, all the cheat engines, and all the updates. If it freezes, you can just power it off and on again and try again. I've never seen it freeze. I've done this like 5 or 6 times. It just pulls down the GitHub repositories for each individual core and it knows where to look. This is going to give you the most up-to-date installation of all the different cores outside of things that haven't been released yet, like the CPS core, which is still in beta. So you can sideload some different cores. But once it's done, it'll say press any key to reboot, hit enter, and you're at the main menu and the MiSTer is ready basically to use. I apologize for the compression. Because of that snow effect they put in the back, compressing this for YouTube just doesn't look right, but it's just what happens. But you can see here we have arcade cores, we have computer cores, we have console cores. Anything that runs on the MiSTer is now ready to work. But what we need to do is actually talk about how do you get stuff onto the MiSTer itself. If you plug in the SD card in any sort of SD card reader, you're going to see that we have all these game folders. Every core has its own folder. Don't go into consoles. This is where they keep the actual code for the cores, but we're going to put our ROMs into the games folder. So say we're going to put something like, I don't know here, a Super Nintendo game. We want to drag the ROM into the SNES folder because we're saying this is for the Super Nintendo core. So take something like Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island. It's a notorious difficult game to get right because it uses the Super FX chip. And for the longest time, this didn't even emulate in software options. You wanted to have an original cartridge. So for me, it's a great thing to test. So I'll just come down over here. I've unpacked the zip file for the game, and I'm just going to pop it right in. And you can take a look and see what the extension of the file is because they are different. But basically, if you just look at the individual core on GitHub, it'll tell you what files are supported. But if I wanted Genesis games, I'd drop them in there. If I wanted something like an MSX game, drop it in the MSX folder. This is really easy. Neo Geo games, drop them in there as well. I will go over more Neo Geo stuff in the future. But now basically we're almost ready to play the game. What we need to do is define the joystick button. So if you hit escape and go into define joystick, it'll let you use whatever USB controller you have hooked up. It'll do a few tests, and now you're going to tell MiSTer exactly what buttons are what on your controller. And this is defining it for all the cores. This is an operating system level definition of what those buttons are. You want to start here first. You can then independently in each core remap buttons if you want them to be different, but this is the easiest way to do it. You want to do it from the operating system. And that's basically it. You have your controller set up. You are now ready to play games. So we put on Yoshi's Island, so we're just going to go to the console cores, and we're going to go down to Super Nintendo Entertainment System. It's going to come up with a black screen, and now we have our Super Nintendo core menu. Now we have to define the controller in here to make sure everything's correct. If you've ever done this before, it's super simple. If you've never done it before, it's also super simple. Sometimes, if you're using a PlayStation controller, you have to check what's A, B, X, and Y because they have symbols. But really, you can remap this as many times as you want. It's very easy. So up here, when I talked about the file extension, we have an SFC ROM. So I'm just going to go ahead and select that. I'll press the A button or enter on a keyboard, and all of a sudden it's going to start loading it. This is in real time, and within under 2 seconds, we are ready to play Yoshi's Island for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. I have played this game a ton. It's my wife's favorite game, and it's one of my favorite games. So I'm familiar with what it's supposed to play like, what it's supposed to sound like, and this is perfect. I can't tell any difference between my Super Famicom with this game inserted and a SCART cable doing RGB to the MiSTer. Only difference is there's less cables involved here, but this is a near perfect hardware description language emulated version of the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, and it is great. And we're going to be doing videos on all the different cores. Even Baby Mario's annoying crying sounds exactly like it's supposed to be. And like I said, I chose this game because it does have additional chips that need to be emulated to work. But if you go to the menu, we have some options here. Under audio and video, we can do different things with scaling of the video. Now, I leave it pixel perfect just like it is. I don't like any filters, but you can do scan doublers. You can put different scan lines on to emulate a CRT. I just like it as is. And if you really want to be a monster about it, you can switch it to widescreen. Please don't. But hey, it's up to you. You can do a stereo mix as well. And then on the hardware side, there's just a few other options, but 99% of the time, you're not going to need to touch these. Everything's going to work perfect. If you click reset, you reset the game, and then if you click exit, you can get back to the main menu core, or you can use the button on top of the IO board to reset the hardware itself. But that's how you get the MiSTer hooked up, and that's how you flash an SD card to be able to get the operating system on. That's how you update the MiSTer with the most original cores, the most updated cores, and that's how you remap a controller to be able to interact with it. Those are the steps to get the MiSTer running for you. We'll have a lot more videos in this series, but this is how you get it out of the box and start playing with it. Short of that, thanks so much for watching. We'll be back with more videos on Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. If you have any other questions about the MiSTer, leave them down below and I'm happy to help. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Bye-bye.